Testing is an important concept in programming. Although we start off writing a simple script.js file with a few lines of code, when we start getting into the real world, you start getting thousands and millions of lines of code, hundreds of JavaScript files, files worked on by many people from different divisions in a company, and most likely all of them starting at different time at the company, all the code changes happening over time at different times as people work on the project. As the complexity of the code and the size of the code increases, it becomes harder and harder for someone to fix a bug that may arise. If you come into a project that has been around for years, you may modify something that may modify another part of the app that you didn't think of. And you start creating all these bugs with new features that you introduce into the app. The longer that code stays in a project, the more likely it is to be touched by different developers. So you see the problem here? For companies, this is a huge problem because you're most likely always growing your product and adding more and more lines of code. That means that they're just going to keep making this giant monster that becomes harder and harder to tame. And bugs cost companies a lot of money. Luckily for us, we have something called testing, which can help us solve this problem. As the name suggests, testing is a method in software development where individual units of source code, assets, or programs are tested to see whether they work properly. Although it may not be a big part of a coding interview when you first get started, it is a big part of any major software company that you work for. For example, in my case, when I first started out as a developer, I didn't know that much about testing, and I got hired without knowing much about testing. But the importance of testing grew more and more as I progressed in my career. And it's one of those things that we often overlook, and a lot of junior developers overlook. But if you want to become a senior developer, and if you want to have a long-lasting career, you really need to master this skill. Remember, every serious company is going to have tests, and they will want you to write tests for your code. So, how can we do this? Well, a test is simply another file in your project. This file never runs in production or on a product website. Instead, it runs in development. It's a file that you run to make sure before you release to production that what you just have written works as intended. Now, the best way to show you how it works is to demonstrate a test for you. So let's go to our RoboFriends app. I have the RoboFriends app here, but I've included a few tests just to demonstrate for you how it works. And by the end of this section, you're going to be able to write these as well. And we're going to write them together. But if I run npm run test, again, a command that comes with create React app, let's see what happens. I get a few things saying that no test found related file changes since last commit because I've already run the test. But if I press A, did you catch that? We have 6 test suites, 16 tests, and 5 snapshots that passed. All right, what does this all mean? And why do all these components have the .test.js file in here? I see a lot of green, which is probably good, but what does this all mean? And don't worry, from here, we're going to unpack it and see how everything works. We're going to learn about what tools we need, what tools we're going to use, and how we can become testing ninjas. By the way, you may hear the term TDD, or test-driven development. That is the idea of writing tests even before you actually write your application code, so that you start writing code based on the tests that you provide. And some people really love this way of working, and you can read up on it and decide for yourself if this is something you would want to try out. Now, to get back to the point. We are humans, and as humans, we make mistakes. It's unavoidable. As an application grows, it is impossible to think of all cases in your code and have all the if statements that take care of all use cases, especially not from the very beginning. Although adding tests will definitely decrease our development speed, since now we're writing more code just for tests, in the long run, if your project is of a certain size, it's always better to write tests because you avoid bugs in the long term. All right, in this section, we're going to learn all about it. As always, we're going to go through some core concepts and build our foundation, and then we're going to get to coding some of our own tests. Let's get started.